It's that reach, isn't it? And that ability to push back against narratives controlled elsewhere, which is causing Donald Trump to now threaten to sue the BBC for $1 billion. Does this, although it's not clear that he has the locus or the ability, or that it would, quite a lot of his defamation suits seem to get thrown out of court anyway. But how should the BBC respond to that?
The BBC should apologise for the edit in the film, and that's it. The BBC mustn't pay him a dime. If the BBC pays tribute to Trump, it will do more to undermine its credibility and its legacy and its standing at home and abroad than any one thing it could do. Trump is a grifter, and the BBC, better to go to court if he could ever find a way of getting it into court and lose than to concede or pay him anything. Because, apart from the fact that legally he doesn't have a leg to stand on, and apart from the fact that you could argue the film was not materially misleading in any way, and the US congressional reports said exactly the same thing, as did a judge, as did Boris Johnson and others in that very good article by John Ware that he's dug up. The BBC cannot, beyond giving him an apology, no donations to his charities. They just have to say there's an apology and put their big boy pants on and deal with it.
Very clear.
So I am slightly more depressed than I was. I also don't like to see the right winning anything. And let's not pretend that there isn't a left-right dimension to this. The fact that Caroline Levitt went straight away and said the BBC News is fake news, everybody should watch GB News, tells you the existential battle the BBC is in. On the plus side, Levitt and Trump have both overplayed their hands. They've actually made it easier for people like me to point to the malign influences and forces that are at play here. And I have to hope that will galvanise people to actually make a stand in defence of the BBC, even if some of them have to hold their nose over some of the things that have happened recently, to understand that this is a bigger moment than any one edit or any one programme, and that there comes a moment where you draw a line in the sand and you defend what you've got, and we need to defend the BBC.
How do you shore up the BBC in the 3 years that we've got before the Farage government might come along and do it all?
We believe all appointments to the BBC should be made through an independent public appointments process, and the parliamentary approval should not come from the executive. It should not come from the Prime Minister or the Secretary of State of DCMS, but should probably come from the Select Committee. Give that parliamentary role to Parliament, not the executive. We also argue that the BBC should have a forever charter. I mean, the fact that this charter renewal, part of the charter renewal discussion is should we continue to even have a BBC, is totally bonkers. I mean, we'd never go into an NHS funding round and say, well, by the way, should we have an NHS? So let's agree there will be a BBC, and then let's separately agree what its operating terms will be for a period of 10 or 11 years to get it out of electoral cycle, and then allow the BBC to get on and do its job. So many of the issues that we raise around governance, around independence, around funding are actually more prescient now than ever. If you look at where we are in UK PLC, Channel 5 is owned by Paramount. Paramount is owned by Larry Ellison, second richest man in the world. They've put this woman, Bari Weiss, in as editor-in-chief of CBS News. ITV is under offer from or in negotiations with Cast, another American corporation. Channel 4 is looking to appoint a new chief executive and has a recently appointed leader. And the BBC now needs to appoint a new director general and head of news. It's all in flux and it's all in play. Now, Lisa Nandy, if the Labour government has learned anything from the last 7 days, it is how the malign forces on the right want to destroy the institutions that make social democracy possible. And if Starmer and his team have learned anything, allowing them to destroy the BBC will remove their only hope of being able to access airwaves with their narrative unfiltered by anybody else. Because, the world's 6 richest men own or control nearly all of the platforms through which we get information. Musk owns X. Ellison is going to be on the board of TikTok USA, Larry Ellison. He also owns Paramount and he owns CBS News. Mark Zuckerberg owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. 4th richest man, Jeff Bezos, owns the Washington Post, Amazon Prime, and also Amazon Web Services, which I think BBC iPlayer sits on. World's 5th and 6th richest men, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, own YouTube and Google. So 6 men, all American, own or control most of the means through which information is discovered, shared, and disseminated. The BBC is one of the few institutions in the world which still has enough scale, and because it is owned by the public and recognized currently as a public asset, has, if you want, the kryptonite to stop this sort of privatization of media at a global level. So this is sort of existential to the BBC, but it's also existential for democratic sort of government, and I would argue not just for Labour, but for all of those social democratic forces that stand against the way in which certainly America and other countries are going. So Starmer and Labour have a chance here to do something really significant, and they should insulate it so that if, God forbid, Farage ever does take power, he doesn't have the tools that Trump has used to cow public interest journalism.
This interview was from the latest episode of Media Confidential, a podcast brought to you by Prospect Magazine. To listen to the full episode, click on the link below. And if you want full access to Prospect Magazine, go to prospectmagazine.co.uk.